Okay, so let me just share screen first. This is the screen I want to share. Okay, today we are on the One Belt, One Road, or simply called Belt and Road Initiative. The Belt and Road Initiative consists of the belt and the road. Interestingly, the belt referred to the yellow line there, which is the land connection with the rest of the road. And the road referred to the maritime road, which is depicted in the bright blue here. So the road means the old Silk Road, but refer to the maritime Silk Road, whereas the belts refer to the land routes. Of course, this is a simplified diagram. The third Belt and Road Initiative International Conference have just finished. There are 151 countries participating in the forum. So there are almost 3/4 of countries are involved in this Belt and Road. So I will present this in two parts, basically. The first part is using the AI, the chat GPT, to give you what the West consider this as Belt and Road. And then at the end, I will present my own reasoning. So the Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI, is also known as the Silk Road Economic Belt and the 21st Century Maritime Silk Road, is a large infrastructure and economic development project initiated by Xi Jinping in 2013. And therefore, this year is our 10th anniversary, and therefore there was the international conference on it just last week. The initiative is designed to strengthen trade, investment, infrastructure connectivity between China and the rest of the world. Here, it typically mentioned Asia, Europe, Africa, even parts of America. For example, Argentina and Brazil are involved in Belt and Road as well. So is Australia. But unfortunately, the relationship with Belt and Road Initiative was signed between China and Victorian government. And we know that our federal government limited the responsibility, limited the ability of a state government to sign national agreements, and therefore I think it was revoked. Of course, there are two components. One is the economic belt. The other one is the maritime Silk Road. This is the same picture again. So let's look at some of the examples which have achieved in the past 10 years. Not all projects are completed, but they are progressing very well. For example, one of the initial investment is the China-Pakistan economic corridor. China built a port at here, Quetta Port, and then built a train road up Pakistan, as well as developing a highway, which will eventually connect to mainland China. What's that name? Casca, connect to Casca. So when this is completed, that means energy, especially oil, from Middle East do not need to go through the Malacca Strait and can import inland at Quadra port and then ship directly into China. So it was when it was announced, I think it is a 60 billion US dollars investment, representing about 5% of Pakistan's GDP. So that is obviously a very important investment. The next one is the port at Sri Lanka. It has a liquid bulk port which will be used to transport mainly again oil, and also a multi-purpose port there. Another example is in Africa, especially from Djibouti. Now, Djibouti is very interesting. China has one and only one military base, and that military base is in Djibouti. And Djibouti holds a lot of military base, including the military base of China as well as United States. China built a railway from Djibouti to somewhere here, this railway. Again, I have talked about this Gada port in Pakistan. It's part of the China-Pakistan economic cooperation. So this is here. The corridor here is, so this is the Pakistan port. In Greece, China also is building a shipping port. We see there are the Chinese Overseas Container Corporation, the ship managed by China, somewhere here. This is the image I get from online. Kenya Standard Gauge Railway connecting the Kenya's capital to the port city in Mombasa. This is very important. And again, as high-speed rail, the rail has should be isolated from other traffics. Otherwise, there will be level crossing, and level crossing is a big problem. Just about a month ago, US has the first, what they call high-speed rail in Florida. It connects the Miami with Orlando. Unfortunately, that railway is not isolated or blocked off from other traffic. So in the first day of operation, there was an accident. The train collided with a car in a level crossing. And in the second day, the same happened. So with its operation in the first 2 days, about 5 lives are lost because the train is running on a well which have level crossing with roads. What they call high speed is only 201 kilometers per hour at its maximum speed stretch. The other part of the railway runs much lower than that. The average speed of the whole journey from Orlando to Miami, which is about 380 kilometers apart, take about 3 hours and 45 minutes. So it is about 100 kilometers per hour on average. This one, the Kenya Standard Gauge run at 250 kilometers per hour. It is not considered high-speed rail in China. The Jakarta Bandung high-speed rail in Indonesia. This one just opened about 2 to 3 months ago during, I think it's the Asian meeting, something like that. So this one has just begin commercial operation. Pakistan, Portugal, Silk Road Maritime, again with Ghana Port. This one, oh no, this one. With Ghana Port, it is now possible to connect Pakistan with the rest of Europe through a shipping arrangement. Again, there's another corridor in Kenya, and this corridor mainly for economic development. It consists of railway, high-speed highway, as well as pipelines. Another interesting thing is about the China-Europe railway network. We know that China is one of the largest manufacturing hub in the world. A lot of products is actually manufactured in China. Previously, if we want to ship any product from China to Europe, one of the consumer centers, it had to ship through from one port on the western coast of China, travel down South China Sea, and then turn around at Singapore, pass through the Malacca Strait, and then probably go through the Red Sea, through the Suez Canal, pass through the Mediterranean, and then somehow got to the port and then shipped there, or going through, pass out from Spain, turn around, and then go to Amsterdam or something like that. So that journey took about 28 days. But if we change it onto a train, not at high speed, just a normal train running at about 200 kilometers per hour, passing through Kazakhstan, and then some of the East Europe countries, and then into Russia, and then coming out again, and then reaching the ports in, say, Amsterdam, or go to Germany. This track takes about 14 days. So it is about 2 weeks shorter in terms of the time taken. At the moment, there is about 1,000 such train in 1,000 in about a month. Yes, about a month. So another track is go right up to Russia, into Siberia, and then go through to Russia's capital, Moscow, and then come out from Moscow through Ukraine or through the country next to it, and then again. So this is the rail network. The rail network have been operating for, I think, 5 years, something like that. And now it facilitates both goods in both directions. Previously, it was only in one direction, mostly products made in China shipping to continental Europe. But now there's a lot of other goods also flowing from the other direction, from Europe to China. Now look at why Xi Jinping have to suggest this Belt and Road. What is the political reasoning behind this? This part is according to AI from ChatGPT. it wants to increase geopolitical influence. That's one reason given. The other reason given is for security and stability. Enhanced economic ties and infrastructure development can contribute to greater political stability and security in regions along the BRI routes. Stable and friendly neighboring countries can reduce potential security threats and conflicts that might disrupt China's development and economic interests. I think that is quite accurate in terms of this, but it is too general. Almost every action by a state somehow is related to its security and stability, and also including its political influence. Counterbalancing the US pivot to Asia, I will come to this point more in more details later on, because I think this is the one of the real reason BRI is created to meet the challenge of US pivot to Asia. So I think this is a valid point, but I will come into this in much more detail. Exporting China's political model, that is absolutely wrong. China do not want to export its political model. China has always been saying that there are more than one political model for any country. The choice of political model should reflect the culture and the civilizations and circumstances of the country. There's no one set that meets all requirements. Now, this is very different from our Western political model. We always say we want to export our political model, being using election to elect a government, and using free trade or capitalism to organize our economic system. So basically, what the West call freedom and democracy. So there is only one political model. China say, okay, if you want to adopt that model, fine with me. I'm only wanting to trade with you. What is your political model doesn't matter. But at the same time, China is also saying we have our own political model. You find our political model interesting. You can study it, and you can adapt some of our policy into your political model. China is not exporting any political model or ideology. So this slide is completely wrong from my perspective. But anyway, as I say, this comes from the AI from ChatGPT. The next one is fostering regional stability. China is a non-alliance country. That means China is not going to sign any treaties with any other countries, so that when one country is acting in one way, China is always supporting that country or not supporting that country. No, China doesn't want to do that. China wants to evaluate every situation by its own merits and then make its own decision. China do not engage in any alliance or treaties. Like, for example, NATO treaties. No, China is not interested in that. So in a way, having trade and with trade volumes might foster regional stability. But we also know that it is only a possibility. Look at the trade war between USA and China, or the technological war between United States and China, totally reflect this regional stability is depending on a lot more different kinds of factors, not just economic. Strengthening domestic political support. Again, I don't think BRI is designed to do this. The Chinese government enjoys a very high domestic support. A long-term study of the resilience of Chinese political system by, I think, is Harvard, a long-term study. I think the whole study takes about 8 years. Find that about the national government enjoys a population support of about 95% before COVID. And after COVID, that support percentage increased to about 98%. So Chinese government is enjoying a huge support from its citizens. So BRI isn't one of the main reasons. Strengthening domestic political support is not one of the reasons to create this BRI initiative. Leveraging economic diplomacy. Again, the Western countries like to accuse China using debt trap to trap developing countries into aligning with Chinese policy. Again, this is not true. If we look at, for example, Africa's debt, Chinese debt only represent about 5% of the total sovereign debts of all the African countries. And most of these sovereign debts is owned to Western institutes, not Chinese institutes. And China has been very generous for debts reorganization or debts elimination. So again, after looking at the political reasoning, I also asked ChatGPT for the economic reasoning. So these are the reasoning given by AI. Trade expansion. China is already the major trading partner of about 160 some countries in the world. And for 2023, the first 3 quarters, China's import and export expanded only by 4.9%. And in that expansion, especially in the 3rd quarter, export still increased. I think it's about 6%, but import decreased by, I think, 0.5%. That means China trade is continuing expansion, trading more and more with the rest of the world. Obviously, the Belt and Road Initiative will help, but that is not the sole reason. Increased investment opportunities. I think this is a very important point. Again, I will go into this in more details later on. Overcapacity utilizations. The West consider China's production is overcapacity. That means they are trying to sue China in terms of dumping of products. For example, United States accused China of overproduction in aluminum and steel. But the fact is that, yes, China is the largest steel production country in the world. The second one, I think, is America. And China's capacity or production is about 10 times of America's. But the amount of exports from China in terms of iron products represent only 3 to 5%. I can't remember the exact detail, about 5% of its total production. So most of the iron products produced in China are basically consumed in China. And of course, many of them will be exported as finished products. For example, the in a fridge, the case, etc. Another important so-called overcapacity is obviously the high-speed rail. Before COVID, China completed a 4x4 grid, 4 horizontal, 4 vertical. Horizontal meaning running from east to west. Vertical mean mainly running from north to south. A 4x4 grid. And for stimulating domestic economy during COVID, China decided to increase that grid to 8x8, almost meaning doubling the number of high-speed rail mileage as well as normal train lines in the next 5 years. So the capacity has been utilized, not necessarily have to be exported. Now, for example, we talk about the example of the high speed of the rail in Indonesia. I think not this one. Before that one, no. Which one? We talk. Yes, this one. The high speed rail in Indonesia. Actually, China exported the technology to Indonesia. So this high-speed rail was actually built in Indonesia with Chinese technology and Indonesian workers. Okay, coming back to here, no. Trade expansion, yes. Investment, yes. Over capacity, no. Okay. China managed its industrial capacity pretty well. Natural resource access. Being one of the largest manufacturing hub in the world, of course, it needs natural resources. We need raw material in order to manufacture goods. So yes, natural resource access. China get all its resources in the open market. China doesn't use any military force to force a developing country to sell its resource under market value. Of course, when we want to buy resources from a country, especially a developing countries, we need mechanism to get the resource from its production site to the port in order to ship around the world. And therefore, Belt and Road Initiative do help to build highways as well as trains to help the natural resources to enable natural resources to be traded in international market. But again, that is not for the sole purpose to be used by China. It helping the developing country to get involved in international trade. Economic growth and development by helping the participating countries with infrastructure development, then the participating countries should be able to make use of their enhanced infrastructure to grow economically. So yes, that's correct. Financial services and institutions. Now, at the same time when BRI is initiated, China started two financial institutions. One is the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, AIIB. Another one is Zero Fund. Actually, there's a third one, is the New Development Bank. Now, AIIB is a investment bank similar to the World Bank, but its initial focus is on Asian infrastructure. But at the moment, it operates, we notice that this AIIB is now more global. For example, at the moment, the Director General was the Brazilian president, the last Brazil's president. She is now based in Shanghai. Zero Fund is operate like a private investment fund, but the money comes directly from Chinese government. It invests on the Belts Initiative. That means the land lines there in order to help to facilitate the investment of BRI. Expansion of Chinese technology and innovation. With exporting products, then companies can make more profits, and these profits can be used in R&D, research and development, and hence provide the economic support for further technology and innovation development. Currency internationalizations. Not until last year, China being the largest trading countries in the world, being the major trading partners with the majority of countries in the world. The use of Chinese currency, renminbi, yuan, in international trade was only about 3% to 5% before the Russia and Ukraine conflict. But after the February 2022, last year, there was a realization that international trade does not need to be balanced or paid using US currency. There's no hard requirement on that. And using US dollars as the trading currency also have a major drawback. When you trade using US dollars, unavoidably, you need to have some US dollars reserve in order to facilitate your trade. The examples from the Russia-Ukraine conflict, we see that United States can single-handedly frozen Russia assets in US dollars. That means any country who end up being targeted by United States government may suffer from a sudden frozen of its assets by the US government. Another example is, of course, Afghanistan. When US retreated from Afghanistan, there is about $7 billion of the money of Afghanistan banks in US Federal Reserve. Biden frozen all this money and confiscated this money, setting half of it to help the victims of 9/11, and then use the other half of it for other purpose. Now remember, Afghanistan is not the guilty party of the 9/11. Of course, we know that Americans invaded Afghanistan using the false accusation that Afghanistan harbor Osama bin Laden. And later on, we found that Osama bin Laden was actually killed in Pakistan, not in Afghanistan. And US armed forces have been in Afghanistan for 20 years. They achieved nothing. So the whole accusation is wrong. But Afghanistan being a weak country, there's no other way to stop Americans from confiscating its really little foreign reserve, being only $6 billion. But it was frozen and confiscated, making the hardship even worse. And therefore, a lot of countries now realize if we continue to trade in US dollars, we may subject to the same treatment by United States. Now, another important thing is when we conduct international trade, then countries need to settle the trade differences. So there is a default standard, which is called SWIFT. The SWIFT organization is in Europe, but is mainly controlled by United States. At the early stage of the Russia and Ukraine war, Russia was kicked out from this SWIFT system so that Russia has no way to settle its trade because international trade, the bank clearing system, Russia is being kicked out. So Russia is forced to create an independent bank clearing system. So is China. And therefore, the internationalization of Chinese currency wasn't the objective of BRI when it was first formulated. But in today, almost 10 years later, we will find that BRI will help to internationalize the renminbi as a trading currency. That becomes true, not because of the design, but because of the global geopolitical circumstances. That related interests. China provides loans and financing for many of these BRI projects. And of course, these loans create interest, and that interest will help Chinese financial institutes. This is similar to any other Western institute which give loans to projects or governments in order to earn interest. So there's no difference here, and therefore I don't think this is really one of the main reasons for BRI. Finally, again, going back to the political reasoning, we come up also with the economic and stability usual and the global influence. So this is almost the same. Okay, so we have looked at the reasoning from AI from the Western point of view. So what is my own reasoning? So from here onwards, it will be Albert's talk, my thinking. First of all, I want to establish some historical facts first. When China first opened up in the late 70s, China and United States enjoyed almost 30 years to 40 years honeymoon period. But the relationship turned sour about 2010. 2010 is a very critical time. China joined the WTO in the year 2000. So it is about 10 years after China joined the World Trade Organization. But for the first 10 years in the 21st century, the relationship between USA and China is still pretty good. But in 2010s, the situation suddenly turned very bad. So we have to look at what happened. One way to look at it is looking at the world's GDP. Of course, we know that the world GDP, the American GDP, is right up there, which isn't represented in this graph. The second largest economy before 2010 was Japan. But from the graph shown here, at about 2009, China almost becomes the second largest economy. At that time, Japan's economy is about $5 trillion. And Chinese economy is about 4.9 trillion. There's about how much $20 million before China catch up with Japan and becomes the second largest economy. China actually becomes the second largest economy by April 2014. April 2014, which China overtook Japan and becomes the second largest economy. So that's why I say 2010 is a critical time. Looking back a little bit longer, about 300 years ago, it was the Qing dynasty in China. At that time, China was one of the world's largest economy as well. But unfortunately, it has a very weak military power, and it was pre-industrial. That means it lacked the ability to mass produce goods. And of course, producing steel is one of the major issues. So when the West and China met about 300 years ago, China found itself militarily very weak against the Western powers, and therefore Chinese suffered several hundred years of humiliation. Today, Chinese people still remember what happened about 100 years ago. 100 years ago, Chinese people are still very, very poor. In 1920s, Qing Dynasty just collapsed. The Republic of China is formed, but there were warlords fighting each other in China. And after this First World War, because China participated with the West, so it was considered one of the countries who win the war. But unfortunately, the area in China's Shandong area was taken away from Germany and given to Japan without China's ability to say no. And that's the result of what we call the May 4th movement. But anyway, at that part, China basically suffered about 200 years of humiliation by that time. So today we realize that you may have a very large economy, but you cannot protect yourself. Then your survival is in big question. Today we can look at a lot of examples: Afghanistan, Iraq, or Palestine, etc. If you cannot protect yourself, somebody will take advantage of you. So one of the most important things for the Chinese is to make sure you have the ability to protect yourself. That wasn't a priority until in 2012. The then U.S. government, Barack Obama, started its so-called East Asia strategy, or specifically the pivot to Asia. It represented a significant shift in foreign policy in the United States. The key areas of this pivot to Asia include strengthening bilateral security alliances, deepening our working relationships with emerging powers, including with China, engaging with regional multilateral institutes, expanding trade and investment, and most importantly to the Chinese leadership is forging a broad-based military presence and advancing democracy and human rights. I highlighted forging a broad-based military presence among many of the key areas, because as part of this increased military presence, United States is going to put about 2/3 of its naval power into Pacific area. So as a Pacific country, China looked at this policy and then asked the question, why United States need to put 2/3 of its power in Pacific Ocean, Pacific area? So he looks around, evaluating every Asian countries, Pacific countries. China cannot find a country worth the effort of 2/3 American naval power except itself. So China suddenly realized, hey, United States now treat US treat China as the major threat, or at least major challenger, and it needs to put a huge military force in our doorstep. Remember the hundreds of years of humiliation which Chinese has just suffered not too long ago. Our leadership understand if we do not increase our defense mechanism, it is very easy to go back to these years of humiliation, which obviously is not good to the people. And if you look around and looking at the military bases, we find that America has a full control of the seaboard of China. China where is the light yellow area. And then in the very north, we have the South Korea. We know we have a strong military presence of American force in South Korea. Next to it is Japan. And we also know that there's a huge military force in Japan. Moving down, Taiwan has always been a close alliance with United States. Although when China and US normalize its political relationship, part of the manifesto include the One China policy. And therefore, United States should leave the military base in Taiwan. But unfortunately, it didn't happen. Taiwan is still buying military equipment from the United States. And United States military are now also on Taiwan Island, although in an informal, non-official basis. But the fact is that there are military personnel in Taiwan, although not in uniform. We also know that we have a military base in Philippines. Going down, we have, as part of the pivot to Asia with strategy, United States trying to have military base in Vietnam. That means any shipment going out from the seaports from China going to Europe, in the summer, it might go through the North Pole, move up through the gap between South Korea and Japan, and go into the North Pole, go around there, come out from Iceland and reach Europe. That's one way, but that is only possible during summer in the Northern Hemisphere. But the major shipment, for example, energy, oil, has to come through the Market Street, the red area here, turn around at Singapore, pass through the South China Sea, and reach China. Looking at that, in case of military conflict, Chinese seaboards will all be blocked by United States military. So this is the first island chain. And not to say the further apart, we have the Philippines, the Hawaii there, which it forms the second island chain. That will make China very isolated. So one of the main main objective is try to break this containment. How to do that? One way is to build a naval force to counter the US containment. But unfortunately, building naval force is a multi-decade endeavor. You cannot build a naval force in a year. 10 years is almost the fastest way. So the window of opportunity, you need at least 30 to 40 years before you will be able to have a naval force strong enough to break the US containment strategy. That means we need another strategy fast, cannot depend on the naval force. That doesn't mean that China shouldn't build a naval force. It only means that building naval force is not a solution to the containment strategy of the United States. The main concern is actually China depends heavily on the energy imports from Middle East, and oil must pass through the Strait of Malacca and South China Sea. And that's why we see that the first major BRI initiative is this China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. That is a corridor which will enable China to ship its oil from Afghanistan into China without going through the Malacca Strait and the South China Sea. And not to also mention the shorter time taken. So that's why the CPEC is a very important part of BRI. As I has explained, the pivot to Asia reveals to China that USA treated it as the major challenger. So that is part of the background. Now look at another data is China's trade surplus. This trade surplus only up to April 2020, basically the first quarter of 2020. We see that China's trade worldwide is mostly a surplus. China is not running trade deficit, it's running trade surplus. And it increased tremendously by 2014, but about 2015, it peaked and then progressively in a much higher average than previously or even in its rising situation here. Trade surplus, by definition, must be stored as values outside of China. So first thing, China has accumulated huge trade surplus, and they must be held as foreign assets outside China. Now, if you move these foreign assets into China, that is a trade in whatever form, either as investment, as goods, etc. Once you move that trade surplus into China, that becomes imports into China, and that reduces the trade surplus. And therefore, as I say, by definition, all trade surplus must be represented by the government's ownership of foreign assets. You park that money somewhere. Traditionally, that money is parked into the US government bonds. So China have been buying and buying and buying of the US government treasuries. But we must remember, in trade, the product that sells represent a value add through the sweat and blood of the Chinese workers. So it is unwise to say, okay, we don't want trade surplus, we just give it away. No way, because first of all, there is a huge value there. And secondly, that value represents the sweat and blood of Chinese workers. There's no way giving that away without compensation. And if the Sino-American relationship worsens, then the US government bonds can easily get frozen, just like what happened after the Russia's Ukraine conflict. Another question is that, should China's trade turn to China deficit? Again, there's a historical lesson to learn. There is an argument. Of course, this argument is morally corrupt. But anyway, this was an argument. When Europe, or in particular, Britain, United Kingdom, trade with China during the Qing dynasty, China is selling mostly tea, porcelain, and silk, and making huge trade surplus. These trade surplus had to be settled by silver. Therefore, a huge amount of silver is flowing into China. Then the West found that the silver is getting less and less, unable to pay for the goods. So that, again, China is having a huge trade surplus against the Western countries. In order to balance that, you have to increase the Western export to China. But unfortunately, most of the goods available in the West is not selling well in China. So eventually they pick opium and intoxicated a huge population of Chinese. And when the Chinese government want to stop the opium imports from the Western countries, they use military force against the Chinese government, and that is the Opium War. So having huge trade surplus also had its own risk. You can only protect against that when you have a strong military ability. Unfortunately, building such a military abilities is a decades-long endeavor. It will not solve the immediate problem. So we need some mechanism to park that huge trade surplus somewhere outside of China. As I said, moving that into China represents trade, and meaning you cut down the surplus. And looking at the surplus, it was increasing. Of course, there are peaks and valleys. Okay, every line, then you have peaks and valleys. That is absolutely correct. But on average, we see that the Chinese trade surplus is actually building long-term. In 2000, it was like that. And then in the later part of the first decade of the 21st century, it is on this level. But in the second decade, it is already in this level. And we know that, for example, in 2023, the trade is also expanding at a rate of about 4.5%. So it is at a higher level progressively. But very interestingly, in the Chinese holding of the US Treasury doesn't increase. Although we see that in this part of the curve, we should have a larger trade surplus, meaning China should have been buying more US Treasury, but instead it went almost flat, actually going down from the peak in around December 2013 and going down to the minimum at around December 16 and then stay almost horizontal. Where had this surplus gone in those years? China is still making huge trade surplus, but the surplus is not represented as increased holding of currency in US dollars. So the big question is, where did the trade surplus go since 2013? Of course, my answer is Belt and Road. Belt and Road Initiative is the investment of the trade surplus in other countries in order to make long-term investment and probably help other countries as well. Okay, that is my presentation, and then I will open up for questions. So I will stop share here. So if you have any questions, unmute yourself and you can ask me, and I will try my best to answer. Yes, very. Anyone?
Oh,
yes, please.
I was just wondering is that why they seem to have been very active in the Pacific area, building parliament houses and various things?
Yes or no? Of course, when you see a challenge, the obvious response is to build a defense mechanism. In particular, the Solomon Islands, we Australia created an opportunity for the Chinese to go in. Remember, we have some rioting in Solomon Islands not too long ago, and we sent our federal police. But unfortunately, the federal police choose not to protect the commercial interests of the Chinese migrants in Solomon Islands. So the local Chinese communities is asking the Solomon governments for helping them by asking the Chinese to come and help. So the Chinese government say, okay, you want me to help you, for example, to train your police officers provide you with police equipments, we are happy to do so. And therefore, there's a safety agreement between the Solomon Islands government and Chinese government. And obviously, the Australian government has a huge response and saying that Chinese government is interfering with Pacific Islands policy. We treat the Pacific Islands governments as our own backgrounds. When they ask for help from the Chinese, they are saying, no, we can't, you can't. And then suddenly there's a huge response from us and from the United States as well. But you look at the historical background, actually recreated the opportunity for the Chinese to come in. Because during a riot, the Australian Federal Police should stay independent and help everybody. You just cannot neglect the Chinese businesses in Solomon Island. The response from Solomon Islands Chinese communities, of course, ask for help. If the help cannot come from Australia, then the natural selection will be, hey, China, come here. We are Chinese, so we are not treated well here. Come here to help. And the Chinese, of course, say, yes, why not? We want to protect you. And then come and talk with the Solomon Island government. I say, well, we'll come to help you. We will teach you, for example, ask you, what do you want? Hey, 5G network. Fine, we have good 5G network. Let me build the 5G network for you. And you have no money. Not a problem. We have Belt and Road. We can lend you money. How long you want to repay it? 10 years? Oh, too short. What about 30? 30 years? Or 50 years? You don't have to worry. What about interest? Okay. What about 2%, 3% per year? Because after all, this is Chinese trade surplus. As I said, you will hold this trade surplus in US dollars. It is very, very risky at this point in time, at least. So it is better to change it into some assets in foreign countries. For example, Solomon Islands. That's one of my reasoning. Okay, any other question?
One more. Sorry. No, go on, Roy.
Question with regard to Russia and China at the moment. I believe there has been ongoing a pipeline transporting energy from Russia into China, but that may be accelerating now because of the situation in the Ukraine. Have you got any idea how that's progressed? Because I don't think it was on the Belt and Road Initiative initially. I think it's just very much a commercial decision between the two countries.
Yeah, similar to the amount of LPG we sold to China. Remember, I think during the Tony Abbott's time, when some big company in Australia here signed a huge LPG support export with China. Again, yes, Russia again needs to diversify its trade. Of course, we know Russia's economic center is in the west, around Moscow. But Russia has been trying to join with European Union since since USSR collapsed. For example, the first president want to join European Union. And in the early days of Putin, Russia also want to join European Union. But it failed. United States not going to allow Russia to join European Union. Because if that is to happen, with the huge resources from Russia, shipping cheaply to industrial centers in Europe, for example, Germany, then the European products will be very, very competitive internationally, making Americans' trade was not competitive. So it was always the long-term policy of United States to block the allying Russia with European unions. So after about 10 years, Russia, Putin realized that there's no way we can join Europe. So it has to look for other ways out. One of the ways out is, of course, through the stance countries, the Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, etc. Another way is, of course, further east, the big China there, join with China and then sell the product to China. And therefore, in around 2010, I think, early days before Belt and Road, then Russia signed a long-term contract with China to supply China with oil by pipelines. So there are huge pipelines from Siberia going into the northern part of China. And that has been ongoing. And of course, last year's Russia and Ukraine war shows that that was a great strategy. Now, when Europe apply sanctions on Russia, Russia say, no problem. You don't want me to trade in US dollars? Fine. We trade in ruby. And then suddenly the European find that you still have to buy Russian oil, but not through the pipelines, through some mechanism. And among them is of course Saudi Arabia. You know, Saudi Arabia made a lot of money last year because it buy its own oil from Russia and sell its own oil to Europe, making a huge profit. So is China. China also signed some long-term LPG contracts with United States. And the contract was signed before the Russia-Ukraine war. Of course, as a value which was considered high at that time. But today, with the Russia-Ukraine war, the LPG is much more expensive. So Chinese oil companies say, hey, that's LPG which I order from you. Don't send it to us. Send it to Europe. Charge us at this contract price, but I will earn the money. So the Chinese oil company is also making huge profit last year through this trade. And obviously, lucky for Russia, the trade increase since the Ukraine war, I think it's about 60%. Huge increase. But Russia's economy is small compared with China, so it only represents a small increase in trade in China. But for Russia, it is a huge increase in trade with USA.
Albert, did I miss it, or did you not reference BRICS?
The BRICS next week.
Next week?
Yes.
Oh, okay, righto.
Yes.
It's on your schedule for this one.
Yes.
Okay, right.
Yes. next week. We are looking at the foreign policy. So we talked about the doctrines last week, and this week we look at one example, the Belt and Road as part of the foreign policy. And next week we will look at another part, which is BRICS. So yes, I will answer the question.
Thank you. That's good.
No problem.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Any question?
All good.
Oh, okay, if that's the case, we will finish a bit early.
Good.
Good. Okay. So
thanks,
thank
Albert.
you for thank you for coming, and then we will see you next week. Bye bye.
Goodbye. Take care. Take care.
Thank you, Albert.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.